it was a gradual path, I think, for me, because I was trained as a classical musician. I started to study music since when I was 5 years old, starting with piano, then choir singing, conducting, then many years of music theory, musicology. I have a diploma in musicology as well, and then gradually I started to compose. Then I was like 16 or 17 years old, so quite early, and then I'd actually never thought to become a composer. But my professors, my teachers who witnessed my first tryings just convinced me, encouraged me, and really convinced me to start to study, and so I just came to it as some gradual, really transformation, and just going deeper and deeper into music, starting from the performance and then arriving through the analysis, through the studying the scores of others, and then arriving to my own music. Piano. I started as a piano, as a bass, but then I sang in a choir, in a professional chamber choir for many years. Which was actually a very important experience for me, for my even composition now, what I understand now, because and we in this choir we even performed many premieres of important Lithuanian composers, and so I really touched the music from inside, and so now I write actually a lot of vocal music, choral music especially, and even not choral music of mine has something choral inside. This monochrome technique, aesthetics. I think it might even come from singing in the choir, where you are not a soloist inside, but you are somehow immersed in this sound, and you have to really listen what others are doing, and choir is a monochrome music ensemble, so that was really important for my formation as a composer as well, not only the pleasure of singing in the choir. Musicology, I was in the music theory, and I was studying mostly the contemporary music, and even there my major theme was vocal music and the use of the text in contemporary music. So I did a few researches on this, and especially on Baltic vocal music, which is kind of important, I think, in our countries, because when I speak in France, in Italy, the choir music is not such important and not so usual thing actually. And in Baltic countries we have wonderful choirs, and there is a really tradition for the early age to sing in a choir, especially in Estonia and Latvia, but also in Lithuania. So this is kind of a trend, I think, for Baltic music in general, not only for my music. I think the most important actually were my composition teachers, my professors, and I was very lucky to study with the two grand Lithuanian composers, which were they really influenced a lot of composers in Lithuania. And it was Bronius Kutavičius at the beginning, and he's famous for his big long oratorios, very ritual, very ancestral kind of music with the big crescendos, and which is also in my music, I realize. And another second professor already in the academy, music academy, was Osvaldas Balakauskas, another very important figure, who created his own harmony system based scientifically. He wrote a musicology book on it, and so he's a huge figure, and very important for me as well, in the sense that I also am very conscious about pitch organization, about creating my own harmonic system, and which is always like a base for my music. seems like my music is very much more maybe about the texture, about the timbre, about the space, but actually the bass always is some very particular harmonic system, which then is expanded and opened through the other parameters. So these figures like Kutavičius and Balakauskas, they are like even opposite, and so I was lucky to take a lot from both of them. And then another person, also my polyphony teacher, was Rytis Mažulis, who's a radical minimalist, writing these really radical scores, micropolyphonical, microtonal, like, I don't know, a piece which lasts half an hour, and there's a choir, singers which only like glissing in a very short interval down during this half an hour. It's called Ayapayapam. It was such an important for me experience in 2012, I suppose. These kind of, it's not even, you can't even describe it as a music almost. It's like sound architecture or something like that. So and of course all other composers like Ligeti or Giacinto Scelsi or many other composers were also important. But then thinking of what actually based my own aesthetics and techniques, I think even now I live in Italy for 15 years, but I still consider myself very Lithuanian, very Baltic and very Nordic composer, whatever it means. So I think these early experiences are always like the most important. I did some work together with Lithuanian artist Žilvinas Kempinas, who lives who's based in New York, and he creates his installations with magnetic tapes which move in a space, and created some random or organized movements, and with the help of the air flow. So these magnetic tapes is something which I also do in my music, for example, just writing the very long notes, drones, which move in a space, and create a kind of a moving sound object, which goes closer, which becomes denser, or which appears, disappears. So these kind of things, and so that kind of visual art is also, which is like really something which relates a lot. And so we also tried to work together and did few sound installations. One is called waves, and waves which is something which you can find everywhere in nature, in music, and visual art, and Sky City, the second one. This term, of course, it exists in visual arts and in describing monochrome paintings, and like in Marko Rochko, it's also like monochromes. It's not something which is really like, and actually this term is a bit controversial, because I often receive the reactions after my pieces that actually it's not monochrome, it's very colorful music. It's actually, when you go deeper to one color, you start seeing more and more all these nuances and shadows and all the possibilities of just one color inside of one color. Even if you imagine in music, I don't know, male choir, I wrote a few pieces for Estonian National Male Choir, so there are like 48 singers, only like tenors, basses, and only male, not even mixed choir, but you never find two people speaking the same voice, even if they are like in the same family. So after all, you have these 48 different colors in male choir. Monochrome is was something about the color, about the aesthetics, about the technique, and it's also related about my even the music itself, in a sense that each piece is like one idea, one single process, maybe very long, maybe cyclical, maybe circular, maybe like a spiral, so it like repeats itself for a few times, like expanding more and more, or in different transformations. But actually every piece has like one kind of main idea, which can sometimes be like only the shift of the intonation, like semitone, which I then expand in like two notes become two chords, or two groups of orchestra, and so on. So it's like a kind of DNA created for each piece, a kind of seed where this tree is growing from it. But I really like to concentrate really on one kind of process, which is perfect for that kind of instrumentation, for that kind of context, for that kind of duration. So like this monochrome becomes mono in a sense of also the musical process itself. Difficult to tell. Well, at the beginning, I used to write only pieces for only one kind of timbre, like one kind of instrumental group, like only voices, only winds, only strings. So that was like purely monochrome actually, and for many years I did only that because of some occasions, and then everyone knew that I write only like monochrome music. But then some different proposals and commissions came, and I started actually to overlap these different groups of the same color. Like in orchestral pieces I have groups of strings, winds, and maybe choir, and maybe organ, which is just like another like world, and but they like remain like closed worlds, closed, a bit hermetic, and just move in a space, and of course influence each other, but remain kind of really closed. And or I wrote pieces for singers, for choir and cello solo, or saxophone solo and orchestra. So then gradually I started to expand this really like purely monochrome instrumentation, and actually now I'm even more excited actually to have more instruments, and really to be able to overlap more layers, and to have this like 3D image a bit, which is more like much more dense in sense of color. So probably the most pure monochrome pieces are like even my recent piece. I still write purely monochrome music, like the piece Unanime for 8 trumpets. So that is kind of really like purely monochrome, representing my technique, aesthetics. It's in first version it was 15 minutes, but then it developed until 25. And it was commissioned by VTR Musiktage, by the WDR, and for trumpet octet for Marco Blau, and the project actually, it's called the Monochrome project. So it was including other pieces, not only mine. But for me, I think it's the most natural environment for what I could have. So after like 20 years of completely monochrome music, I had this wonderful proposal which I couldn't accept, but of course it was not a big challenge for me to write a piece for Sinfonietta with 16 different instruments. Well, there are like 5 strings and 7 winds, but they are all different. Then I added accordion, and I have 2 vibraphones, and there is synthesizer like an accordion. So I tried somehow to make it more closer to something which helps me to create an amalgam of timbres and to work on this still micropolyphonic way. And the title is Sleeping Patterns. And well, I used to be inspired mostly by the nature phenomena before, but our body, of course, it's a part of it. So many ideas come from just observing the nature, especially in terms of the time concepts, like the cyclical time, which is in nature, like day and night cycle, the seasons, and the moon cycle, and also in our bodies we have the cycles, and so our perception and our perception of time and is also it can't be not connected with what actually we are, and the cyclical time is something which is very natural for us. So I think that music also could follow that kind of concept. And so cyclical time is one time constant, but there is also together with this there is also continuous transformation, which metamorphosis without the return. So we when we are both, so we go to some kind of evolution until the death, and that same thing happens also in nature. So then going from the nature, I also get a lot of ideas from our body. Like I use a lot of regular rhythms, which are like our walking steps or heart beating or eye movements. So they are all regular, but they are not synchronized probably. And also what happens when we sleep is also very interesting, and because our brain waves go slower and slower until the last stage of the deepest stage of the sleep, the deep sleep, and then it goes in acceleration until we wake up. So these processes are really like very musical for me. So this time I thought to create this metaphor of sleeping patterns. And well, patterns is also a very musical term, and there is this beautiful piece by Morton Feldman which is called Why Patterns. So it's like a question, or, which probably, I actually don't know the story about that piece, what actually he meant about it, but the pattern is something which you really find often in music, and it's some rhythms, models, and melodies which repeat. So, so in my music there are 7 slightly different tempos of pulsating single sounds, which are going in different groups of the ensemble. There are like few groups of like 3 strings, 2 strings, then 2 vibraphones, 3 winds and 3 brass, and then the different groups which are also like melting together. They are changing. The grouping is also like in a continuous transformation. But so these rhythms are going overlapping through these lines and create that sense of a sound body, like a human body, with all these different pulsations, like heart pace and walking steps, which also change because our like heart also beats like faster when we are like we are walking faster. So all these changes. So I'm trying to put these kind of very organic things into music, and finding different associations in nature or our bodies, which is a part of it. The score is actually, my scores are quite simple because as I use always like long-lasting notes, these single notes, or I write for instruments, or I write for voices. So for me, the most important thing is always to have a sound, which starts always from nothing. It's like every sound is like a wave. So I have never used sound attacks, which in vocal music, for example, it means there is no consonances, because consonances would be like an attack for the sound. So even if I write vocal music with some minimal poetic text, I always cut the consonances just to leave the purest form of the sound, which is a wave. And sounds which come from nothing, they reach a certain dynamics and then disappear again, and then you create the dense textures of these pulsating sounds. You still have a sense of continuity, and even if it seems like the sound comes from nothing, actually maybe it's just invisible. So I have this actually an idea of have infinite sounds, but you can't write an infinite sound for a wind player or a voice, because they have to breathe. Even for a string player, they have to change the bow. So actually what I do, I measure very carefully for how long, for example, if I write for cello, so how long is the bow? So then it will decide the duration of that kind of wave. If I write for singers, so I check how long they can sing the note in a certain dynamics without breathing, and the same for wind. So only with organ, which is the most beautiful instrument for me, you can have really infinite sounds, because they can push the key and then it can last forever. So, but otherwise, actually it could be even an idea of infinite sounds, but they are just cut it into these pulsations, waves, because of the breathing, and it actually sounds like breathing, these kind of pulsating sounds. And so yeah, breathing is something which is also regular, and it comes from a human body, so it's something which also explains that kind of organic approach.